What's going on, guys? It's Gordy here for the Bonkers Cards podcast, episode number 4. This week, I'm going to be talking about everything there is to know about card shows. Some tips and tricks in terms of the preparation, how to go about walking the show floor, how to negotiate deals, and some of the upcoming card shows that I'll be at, as well as some card shows that you can check out for the rest of this year. So as we get into the show, I just want to remind everybody, this podcast is on YouTube, Spotify, and clips of this podcast will be on Instagram and TikTok as well. So be sure to be following Bonkers Cards on all channels, as well as subscribe to bonkerscards.co to never miss an update from me, everything vintage related. So again, when it comes to card shows, it's pretty interesting to see the transition that we've seen over the last several years in card shows. We've seen a huge growth in card shows as the hobby exploded in 2020. Some might say that we've actually had too many card shows. Every single weekend, especially here in the Northeast, there's a card show to go to, which is a good thing, but it also offers sometimes a little bit of stress, people not realizing which is the right show to go to. Anytime there's too much of anything, it's not always a good thing. Me in particular, I like to go to my small local show. I'm based out of northern New Jersey. There's a Garfield, in Garfield, New Jersey, there's a show bi-weekly that has some vintage cards. That's where I like to show up. But there's also larger national shows, right? Like The National, that's every summer. This past summer, it was in Chicago. Next year, it's gonna be in Cleveland. And the following 2 years, it's gonna be back in Chicago. It's pretty interesting to see the growth in the national and these larger national card shows. This past year, there were over 100,000 people that attended the national. That does show that there is a growth in the hobby, regardless of whether or not prices are going up or down. There are still people coming out to these card shows. Some of the other larger card shows that exist, you've got the Burbank card show out in California that has been gaining a lot of steam and traction over the last year or so. You've got the Nashville card show, you've got the Dallas card show, and you have the Philly card show. Those are all pretty large shows that have dealers come in from all over the country, and they happen a few times a year. Later towards the end of the episode, I'll talk about those shows and some of the upcoming dates and some of the shows that I might be attending as well. So as we are starting to see more card shows pop up, some people are asking, well, how do I go about going to a card show? What are some of the things that I can do to better prepare? One of the things that a lot of people talk about at card shows is that cards are always one of the things that people talk about at card shows all the time is that cards are always overpriced. So how can we get through that? I have a couple of tips and tricks that I want to give in terms of how I go about preparing for a card show, as well as how I go about negotiating and actually making deals. So let's talk about preparing for a card show. When I am ready to go to a card show, whether it's a small local show or the national, I have in my head a checklist of some of the big cards that I'm going after. Whether that's for a specific set that I'm looking for, or a player, or a card that I have noticed has started to gain popularity in terms of value, I go into the show thinking about anywhere from 3 to 10 cards that I know that if I see and it's priced right, I want to make a move on. So think about what cards you want to look for before you go to the show. The next thing I want to do is look up the value of that card. Now, people ask me all the time, how do I value baseball cards? One of the ways that I always look at valuing a baseball card is seeing what is this card selling for on eBay. It's easy to do this. Search the card and the grade that you want. So for example, I have here a 1952 Burke Ross Willie Mays in an SGC 5 grade. What I'll do is search 1952 Willie Mays Burke Ross SGC 5. I'll then filter it to sold and completed listings. That way I'll be able to see what has this card been selling for as of late, giving me an idea of what I should see the sticker price for at a show. Now, if this card has recently sold for $2,500, I would imagine this card will probably be ticketed at a show at $3,000 or $4,000. Dealers always are overpriced at shows. It's your job to know what the real value is and to make a fair offer to them. So that is how I go about valuing the cards. So once I figure out what cards that I want to look at and what cards I have valued, I'll think about the next part of my preparation. What cards am I bringing to the show for possible trade value to help land some other cards that I want? So let's say there's a card in my collection that I'm no longer interested in keeping for myself, but I know would have value at a show. I will again do the same process. Look up your card on eBay, use 130point.com, some of these other resources that show you exactly what a card is worth. And once you find the value of that, you have that in your head going into the show. So if you see a card that you want, you can use this card as a supplement to cash to potentially land the card that you want. So once you know the value of your cards and the value of the cards that you're going after, you're ready to rock. The last thing that I'll talk about in terms of the preparation for a card show is think about how much money I'm willing to spend. I do notice oftentimes in the hobby, people might overextend themselves on certain cards or transactions that they're in. Have a budget before you go into the card show, whether that's pulling out a specific amount of cash or having a certain amount of budget in your PayPal or your Venmo that you're willing to spend. Go into the show with a budget. I'll talk about how to leverage using cash in deals later on in this episode. I think it'll be very helpful. So let's talk about once you're actually at the card show, actually navigating the show once you enter. Some of these larger shows, it can be quite overwhelming. There could be multiple show floor rooms. You need to figure out where the cards are. You got to get the lay of the land. So what I always like to do as soon as I arrive to a show is do a quick scan of the entire room. That means briefly walking the whole show floor and trying to see which dealers are reasonably priced by just looking at the cards and some of the sticker prices, recognizing what are some of the larger dealers there, some of the selections that they have, just doing a quick walkthrough of the whole show. What I will say is if you're walking the show floor and you notice a card that you like, that you also recognize is well priced, I would recommend going and making an offer right there. You don't know if that card will be there when you turn back around, right? I've had many experiences where I've seen a card that's really well priced, I really like it, but I want to walk the rest of the show floor and see if there's any better deals. If you think a card is a good deal, it probably means that somebody else thinks that card is a good deal. Take advantage of the fact that you saw it first and close it. So I'll talk more about actually how that closing process looks like and the best way to negotiate a deal in a little bit, but I want to talk about the rest of actually navigating the show floor. So as you're moving through and have assessed some of the different dealers and tables, you want to make sure that obviously the cards that you're looking at are authentic and legitimate. One of the things that I try to not look at for the most part at card shows is raw cards. I typically like graded cards, but you might be a collector of raw cards. Figure out what it is that you value and what you want to look for and focus your time there. I personally have found that dealers oftentimes are overvaluing raw cards, especially as of late, as the market has started to come down in prices. Many dealers are holding on to prices that are just no longer there. So I don't spend a lot of my time purchasing raw cards that are, quote, at book value to many dealers. So that is one thing that I would be cautious of. It's very easy to look up value of specific graded cards. It's a lot less arbitrary in terms of the value. Unless a card is really well centered, most of the time a grade 3 is going to be consistent across whatever grade 3 that you have, for example. So once you've figured out what kind of cards you like, the show floor, what you're doing in terms of walking around, I want to talk about actually making an offer and the process of buying cards at a show. So once you've found a dealer that you recognize has fair prices, it's time to make an offer on the card. So 3 simple tips that you can leverage to get the best deal on a card would be this. Firstly, try to maximize the number of cards that you can buy. If you see a number of cards that you want, the more cards that you can buy, the better deal the dealer is going to give you. Why is this? Because you're offering the dealer liquidity. So the percent off that you're going to get will be more the more cards that you buy. Secondly, leverage cash. Cash is still king. Card dealers will always prefer you to pay in cash, and when you give your offer, let them know that you can pay in cash. It will help. Thirdly, you want to give a reasonable offer. I don't spend my time with dealers that are priced double on comps. But if you recognize that a dealer is just slightly over comps, that is where I would focus my attention on. So, for example, if you recognize that a card is typically selling at $100 and the sticker price is $120, try to offer 80% of the value of that card on its true value. So for this example, I would offer $80 on the card. Now, the dealer likely is trying to at least get the full value of the card, but see how much they come down. Based on the next price they give you, you can then move forward. And again, if you see multiple cards, this could be a good time to then add an additional card into the purchase. You're not always going to get the best deal, but focus on the dealers that are the most reasonably priced, and focus on the dealers that will actually listen to the offers. And I know it's been difficult. The market has certainly changed over the last 6 to 12 months, and many dealers are stuck with cards that are way, way, way overvalued versus where they had initially purchased them. That is not your problem. Unfortunately, it's their problem. So don't spend time offering on cards that the dealer is staying at double the price. Again, you will never be able to purchase a card that you don't make an offer on. So don't be afraid to offer what you think is fair value on the card. Now, I'm not encouraging you to offer 50% of the card, because that's going to get the dealer mad and you won't be able to work with them likely in the future. But again, opening at 80% of the card's fair value is a really strong way to start a conversation. Now, speaking of conversation, one of the tips that I can give you in terms of making a deal with a card show dealer is having conversation with them. As you're looking at the cards on their table, ask them, do you collect cards? Who do you like to collect? Where are you from? Do you do cards full time? These are all excellent questions that can help generate conversation and get a sense for who you're working with. One of the tips that I have is to always ask if the card dealer does it full time or as a hobby or not. Typically, I have found that dealers that do this as a hobby understand the collector's mindset a little bit more and will probably give you a better price. If you're working with a dealer that does it full time, he's sticking to a set margin, he might have a lot of inventory, which means that he is a little bit, unfortunately in this current market, over his head in terms of some of the prices he bought, unless he recently just bought a collection. So those are all things that you can keep in your mind as you're working a deal with a dealer. So again, as you offer, go through the process, see what they come down to. These are things that I have done in order to get the best deals for me at a card show. Now, in terms of the relationship that you build while going to card shows, people, especially if you want to consistently build your collection, you want to build relationships with other collectors and dealers. And like I said, other ways to do that are asking them who they collect, where they're from, things that they like. Now, remember, people like to build relationships with others. If you give a dealer business in the future, they might be able to give you a better price. And they will remember the people that have bought from them in the past. I have found that as I've bought consistently from similar dealers, they have generously given me deals in the past. I've been working on these relationships for over 2 years, and I've been able to take the benefit of that. You can start doing that when you go to your local show or some of these larger national shows and keep in touch with some of those dealers. Again, another thing that you can do in terms of bringing relationships to the dealer, you can bring your cards to them. And as you get to know them more, you might be able to leverage trading versus having to use your cash to purchase cards. So stepping away now from what it's like at card shows in terms of buying and some advice that I have for purchasing at card shows, I want to talk about one of the trends that I've also seen and the benefits of going to a card show is actually seeing things beyond just sports cards. I have noticed recently at card shows, there's a lot of memorabilia, there's signed items, there's frames, there's also a lot of autograph opportunities. One of the trends, especially at the larger shows like the National, is there are huge athletes that come to those shows just to sign. So if you're a collector of autographs or want to meet some of your favorite athletes, going to a card show can be a great opportunity to do that. I saw the last card show I was at, I saw a really cool autographed Albert Pujols frame jersey inscribed with his 700th home run. I mean, for me as an Albert Pujols collector, if I had the space for it, I would totally be buying that signed jersey. That's one of the reasons why I like sports cards more than jerseys. It's just that sport cards are a lot smaller and easier to display than large jerseys. So anyway, wrapping up kind of this conversation around sports cards and going to card shows, think about how to best prepare for the show. Look up the value of the cards that you know that you want ahead of time. Look up the value of your cards that you want to trade with ahead of time. Identify the dealers that are the most well-priced based on the prices that you have researched. Approach the dealer and strike a conversation with them, and then offer a fair value offer to the dealer. I always like to start at 80% of what I notice the card is selling for and listening to the response of the dealer. So one of the other conversations that I wanted to have, I guess, on this podcast episode is talking about the future of card shows. As I mentioned, there are a ton of card shows going on, both regionally and at a national scale. I foresee the amount of these shows actually starting to, I would say, consolidate over the next few years because of just show burnout. But the larger shows will continue to gain prominence. I think the Burbank Card Show and the National both will continue to rise in prominence. I was at the National this past year and it was unbelievable. Like I said, 100,000 people showed up to that show, and you can just sense the power of the hobby in that. So I think there will be a growth in those large national shows. One of the ways that I could see as an improvement to card shows is to start to making it more of a full-on experience, whether that means bringing in music acts or making, some of the local sports teams or celebrities a little bit more accessible at those shows, as opposed to just putting them behind closed doors for the autograph room. I think those are ways that sports card shows can get a little bit more inviting and also grow. Thinking about how you can make it more of an experience is something that I'm looking for in card shows of the future. Now, a lot of people will think, well, now that so much trading and buying and selling activity is happening online, whether it's through Facebook, eBay, TikTok, YouTube, what does that mean for card shows in the future? I still think there is a huge demand for in-person experiences and events. So I do think that card shows will continue to be a huge, important benefit of the hobby. You've noticed that Fanatics has announced Fanatics events, and Fanatics will be moving into the show space. You have the big showrunners that I spoke about earlier, like Burbank and the National. They're not going anywhere, and they're going to continue to invest in this space as the hobby grows and more collectors come into it. Again, I mentioned that there are some upcoming shows that I myself might be heading into. Some of the big shows that I talked about were Nashville, Dallas, and Philly. I know that Nashville's going on October 12th to 15th, which is happening right around now with me shooting this. The Dallas show, which is a huge show, I know always has a lot of vintage. That is November 2nd to the 5th. I don't think I'm going to make it to that one, but there is a Philly show December 1st through the 3rd. I am looking to potentially go to that show. I think the Philly show has gained a lot of prominence over recent years. They do it, I believe, 3 or 4 times a year, and that'll be the first time that I go to Philly. So I am looking to check that out. And if you're going to Philly, definitely try to find me. I would love to meet you guys. I will be posting content as I get closer to that show, talking about some of the cards that I'll be looking for and other cards that I'm bringing. If you are interested in just checking out sports card shows in your area, the easiest way to do that is simply Google sports card show near me. Collectors Digest, Sports Collectors Digest actually has a page and it breaks it out by state that you're in. You can click on it and it keeps up to date of different regional card shows that you can get into. So definitely use that. That's how I found this little, the Garfield show at Garfield, New Jersey, and the Morris County Card Show that I've been going to. It's an easy way to jump in on that. So again, just in summary of some of the things we talked about, there is a lot changing in the sports card space, especially when it comes to card shows, but the right preparation, actually executing a fair negotiation and working with reasonable dealers, building those relationships, those are all things that you can work on for the future. So if you liked this episode and you got some value from it, please subscribe to this YouTube channel, subscribe to this podcast. Check out these videos on TikTok, YouTube Shorts, and Instagram. You can find me on all those social channels at Bonkers Cards. You can also subscribe to my blog at bonkerscards.co, where I write a monthly newsletter talking about things that I have going on, as well as what's going on in the vintage card market. I have some really big news and a big upcoming break that I'm really excited about. So if you are interested in sports cards breaks and vintage breaks in particular, this next break is going to be the biggest break that I ever do. And I'm going to be announcing it within the next month. So you'll want to be subscribed to the channel and follow me on all social platforms for that update. Again, my name's Gordy and this has been Bonkers Cards. Looking forward to seeing you guys for the next one. Thanks, guys.